So if God exists and he's able and we are created in his image, why does he even create the capacity in us to do evil if we are created in his good image?
To answer that question, yes. Is he willing? Can he? Of course he can create us without the capacity of doing evil, and he can stop. But did he? No. So that's the most tough question in Christianity, I find, that the Bible doesn't clearly say an answer for. So, but I do know some other stuff. Okay. Just follow me with this.
Okay.
In science, or even in theology, when we try to answer a question and we don't find an answer to that question, we learn that we change the question. Because by changing the question, we might find an answer to that question close enough to the question that we cannot find an answer for.
Okay.
Do you follow me with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we cannot answer that question, and it has been years. That question actually from the almost 1500 BC, they were trying to find an answer for. We can't answer that question. Why God? How God? Couldn't God do this? Maybe God might do it. We didn't know the answer to that. So let's change the question. And my question that I propose here, do we have enough evidence in that God who allowed that kind of pain in my life, enough evidence to trust him? I don't get an answer why he allowed that suffering in my pain. He doesn't answer that. But at least do I have enough evidence to let me trust that kind of God that allowed that kind of suffering in my life? And the answer, yes. I have three things. Number one, the cross. Look at the cross. What God is doing on a cross. At least, at the very least, it tells me that God doesn't just see us from up from heaven and say, God, guys, you deal with that, like God be with you, good luck. No, he shared the human sufferings. So it tells me that he didn't just become distant of it, but he was part of the human sufferings. Right. And we read this many verses in Hebrews, actually chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. Very strong verses about this. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. While Jesus was here on earth, he offered prayers and pleadings with a loud cry and tears to the one who could rescue him from death. And God heard his prayers because of his deep reverence for God. Even though Jesus was God's son, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. In the same book, Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14 and verse 17 and 18, just a few chapters before. Because God's children are human beings, listen, made of flesh and blood, the Son also became flesh and blood. For only as human being could he die, and only by dying could he break the power of the devil, who had the power of death. Therefore, it was necessary for him to be made in every respect like us, his brothers and sisters, so that he could be our merciful and faithful high priest before God. Then he could offer a sacrifice that would take away the sins of the people. Since he himself has gone through suffering, he himself, Jesus Christ, has gone through suffering and testing. He's able to help us when we're being tested. So at the very least, it tells me that when seeing God on a cross, that he didn't just become distant from the suffering, he became part of it. And that's a big deal. It's only in Christianity. No other religion I see that the Creator himself being part of my sufferings. He doesn't remove my suffering for some reason, but at least he shared that with me. Is that clear? Yeah. Number two, which is very hopeful to anybody listening and passing through hard time, in the cross, it tells me also that this is not the end. My suffering now and my pain, what I'm passing through, it's gonna have an end. Yeah. Eternity. Yeah. And again, that's only in Christianity, only in the cross. We don't see this in, for example, Buddhism. They don't believe even in the concept of sin and salvation. There is no life after this life. The death is the end of it. So I'm gonna just suffer and suffer. But in Christianity, because of what God did on the cross, if I believe in him, it tells me that in that cross, I will have an end to my pain. And all the loved ones that may be family members, yesterday we had some talks with people around us, were talking about their suffering and their pain. We all go through tough times in our lives. In the cross, we know that it will have an end. very, very strong verses that we all know of in Revelation chapter 20, verse 12. The most famous verse that I think we all memorize in Revelation chapter 20, verse 12. And that's, he says, I saw the dead, both great and small, standing before God's throne, and the books were opened, including the book of life. And the dead were judged accordingly to what they had done as recorded in the books. Also in Revelation, just one chapter after, chapter 21 and verse 4, it tells me there is an end, there is hope in eternity, that this suffering will end sometime, and sometime, somehow, very soon. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. Romans chapter 2, verse 5 and 6. I like to read so many verses, so I want that truth to sink in our souls and minds. Romans 2, verse 5 and 6. But because you're stubborn and refuse to turn from your sin, you're storing up terrible punishment for yourself. For a day of anger is coming, when God's righteous judgment will be revealed, and he will judge everyone according to what they have done. What that verse tells me, that also going to be a judgment. So the first one is that on the cross, he shared that human suffering. So I'm not just alone by myself on this earth suffering. No, he's with me, and that makes a huge difference, that the Creator himself is with me. Number two, that on the cross, I see that there will be an end to that pain and suffering sooner or later by being with him. There are no tears or pain. And the most important one also for me, that there'll be a judgment, like the verse we just read. All the people who caused harm in this world, think of Hitler. 6 million people he killed. Because God is just, there'll be a justice in front of God because of that harm and that pain. So that's really important. And the last thing I want to say about this topic is, I like Pastor Rick Warren when he said that sometimes we want the product without the process. You know this phrase? Maybe you heard it before. And I know we don't like pain. Nobody does. But that's reality. We have to face it. The pain is a tool that God used in my life somehow to shape my character. When we go to Africa, for example, our ministry, and we see how the people are suffering in many places, they can't sleep, they don't have places to sleep at, they don't have water at all. It's very tough condition in most of the countries in Africa. And I see that they are strong people. They are really faithful people. It's tough, but they are very strong, being close to God. Somehow, I would say much more than people have luxury in their life. Yeah. I'm not saying that that's the way it should be, that we always have to suffer. But if God allowed certain pain in my life, look at the cause, why God allowed this, because there'd be a good thing coming out of this. Most probably your character being shaped for a good role. And some people saying in Revelation that when we go to heaven, most probably this will be like our preparation to our characters to be ready to our roles that we will take in heaven. Because we know from Revelation, we're not just gonna sing nice songs with guitars and just worship him. That can happen, but also we're gonna have roles in eternity. And most probably that pain being used here on earth to shape our characters to get ready to what he will entrust us with. So, and on earth, by the way, this is the only time you can give a sacrifice of praise. Only on earth, because in heaven there is no pain at all.
Yeah.
So where else while being suffering and passing through hard time, you can still trust him? Exactly like the Psalms 22 that we just read.
Right.
Where are you? And on the following chapter, oh, you're my shepherd. So anybody who's listening, or even us that might pass through hard times in our life, that's the norm thing. And sometimes it's a good thing. And just stick with him, and he will heal at his own timing. Sometimes the answer might not be complete healing, as many of our friends and family members we prayed for and they just gone to heaven. We'll see them one day. And that's the beauty of the cross that we just shared. But in both cases, regardless of the outcome that you are waiting to see, just stick with him. Cool?